From the White House in the office of the President of the United States, we present an address by Dwight D. Eisenhower. This is the farewell address for President Eisenhower, whose 8 years as chief executive come to an end at noon Friday.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. We now stand 10 years past the midpoint of a century that has witnessed 4 major wars among great nations. 3 of these involved our own country. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications.
Why do we bury our sons and brothers in lonely graves far from home? Our men are dying to preserve a way of life. These privileges, these rights, they're precious enough to fight for, precious enough to die for.
The greatest force for good in the world, and we have not an obligation to go out and fight and start wars, but to certainly do everything we can to spread democracy and freedom throughout the world.
We shall pay any price, bear any burden to assure the survival and the success of liberty.
What are we fighting for? Freedom? Freedom.
I think we fight because it's necessary and because it's right.
We're not talking simply about the price of gas. We are talking about the price of liberty.
We seek neither territory nor bases. We fight for the principle of self-determination.
America's strength and, yes, her military power have been a force for peace, not conquest.
By keeping our military strong, by using force where we must, America is making a difference for people here and around the world.
Our cause is just, and no matter how long it takes, we will defeat the enemies of freedom.
We live here in the United States of amnesia. No one remembers anything before Monday morning. Everything is a blank. We have no history.
Guatemala, 1954. The United States intervened unilaterally to protect its vital interests. Lebanon, 1958. The United States feels its policy of containment in the Middle East is threatened. Responds openly and unilaterally. The United States intervened in Laos, the Congo, Brazil.
There are so many theories about what happened in Iraq and why we really went in, but when you look at the history of the United States, almost every president, there is something we don't like somewhere in the world, and we've got to dispense military force.
Ronald Reagan invaded Grenada in 1983.
Last night, I ordered U.S. military forces to Panama.
This is not about one president or one party. We fight as a nation because we perceive it is in our interest to fight, and we then mention words like freedom and nice common values that who can be against freedom, when in fact much more has been going on privately.
World War II is without question the formation of the American military empire.
General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander-in-Chief, Allied Expeditionary Force.
I have complete confidence
that the soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the United Nations will demonstrate that an aroused democracy is the most formidable fighting machine that can be devised.
Eisenhower was there and saw it happening. He had seen the buildup of the American military to fight World War II.
In this war, more than any other in history, we are on the side of decency and democracy and liberty.
He believed very deeply in the necessity for World War II and felt that Nazism was a terrible tyranny. And he brought this conviction and drive to defeating Nazi Germany.
People waited for this moment, the culminating victory, the end of the war.
We were on top of the world. We were the only unwrecked major power on Earth. Europe was bleeding to death. Japan was gone. Those paper cities had all been burned up. So what are we doing?
At 2:45 in the morning, August 6, 1945, Colonel Tibbets takes the Enola Gay.
It is an atomic bomb. It is a harnessing of the basic power of the universe.
The United States bombed the Japanese city of Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, and 3 days later, they detonated another atomic bomb on the city of Nagasaki.
What has been done is the greatest achievement of organized science in history.
I can remember in the Pacific when the word spread that the bombs had been dropped. 99.9% of us were delighted because we'd been convinced that if Japan was not hit by nuclear weapons, 1 million of us would be killed. Drop those bombs and they will surrender. Well, they were trying to surrender all that summer, but Truman wouldn't listen because Truman wanted to drop the bombs. To show off, to frighten Stalin, to change the balance of power in the world, to declare war on communism. Perhaps we were starting a preemptive world war. Eisenhower hated the dropping of them and thought it should not have been done.
In the background was the growing conflict between two great powers to shape the post-war world. Already an iron curtain had dropped around Poland, Hungary, Yugoslavia.
You see, we had to fight communism wherever it was in the world. So a decision was made that the United States remain militarized permanently.
We lack the weapons to defend ourselves. Build, prepare is the cry. Quickly, the government springs into action and initiates a gigantic rearmament program. A program designed to make America the arsenal of democracy.
From that moment on, the American empire was in every corner of the
In Burma and Iceland.
We were going to maintain dominance, not just of Europe and not just of Japan, but of the entire globe.
Where the debate and controversy begins is how far does the United States go, and when does it go from a force for good to a force of imperialism?
People complain a lot about American arrogance and American power, but the great threat for the future is not American power and American strength. It would be American weakness and American withdrawal.
They do believe that this is not only for the long-term benefit of the United States, but it's for the long-term benefit of everybody else as well. We'll bring them American values, prosperity, peace, all the rest of it. But the way we're going to do that is to take over, even more than we did at the height of the Cold War. After the Second World War, the United States literally divided the world up into commands. And some American officer was responsible for every region of the world. There was this domino theory. If any of these places fall to communism, then the next place and the next place and the next place will fall as well, and the next thing you know, they're in Missouri.
Once upon a time, your hometown was safe, but not now. It is possible for a rocket to strike your home right now, today, right now. And what defense remains? Strength. Strength, ready if we need it.
When my dad first became president, he came in at the real beginning of the thermonuclear age.
I think we have to put the 1950s into perspective. We look back today and we think the 1950s was a period of Elvis Presley and poodle skirts. But in fact, it was a very dangerous period of time.
Defense budgets throughout the Western world doubled or tripled in the 4 years between 48 and 52.
The Soviets are outproducing America's aircraft factories.
There is a threat, but we can't measure how much is enough defense spending to stop the Soviet Union. So by the time Eisenhower is president, there is a huge new flow of cash into defense industries.
He was the first to acknowledge that a permanent military establishment would be required during this period, but that unless we could find some kind of breakthrough, that in fact it would end up creating a terrible cost.
The cost of one modern heavy bomber is this: a modern brick school in more than 30 cities.
It has 2 electric power plants, each serving a town of 60,000 population. It has 2 fine, fully equipped hospitals.
This is not a way of life at all, in any true sense. Under the cloud of threatening war, it is humanity hanging from a cross of iron.
My father, as president, had strong guiding principles. He used to say, modern weapons take food from the hungry and shelter from the homeless. And so he was fighting with the Pentagon all the time for asking for too much and Congress for giving it to him.
I don't think we should pay 1 cent for defense more than we have to.
Well, Eisenhower saw us starting to build program after program that was just out of control. And his own ability to shape national security policy was being hemmed in by these forces he couldn't control, and he was the president.
On at least one occasion, Eisenhower was heard to say by those in the room, "God help this country when somebody sits at this desk who doesn't know as much about the military as I do."
My fellow Americans, this evening I come to you with a message of leave-taking and farewell, and to share a few final thoughts with you, my countrymen. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
You have to realize this is one of the great presidents, great military leaders. On his way out the door, at the end of his second term, he says, by the way, watch out for the military-industrial complex.
People know that he invented the phrase military-industrial complex, but very rarely do you see the whole thing and realize how utterly strident his warning was. I think it's one of the most profound statements ever made by an American president.
Just like George Washington gave his warnings about foreign entanglements and things like that, my dad was giving his warning against letting this military-industrial complex get out of hand.
We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
president has asked Congress for $401.7 billion for fiscal year 2005.
Our country spends more on defense than all of the other 18 members of NATO, plus China, Russia.
From my standpoint, I think numbers almost are distracting.
This is the medium machine gun, 7.62 millimeter, over 450 rounds a minute.
So I'm here to see the hit-to-kill technology. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a missile that goes up and shoots tactical ballistic missiles out of the sky. These are my two daughters.
President Eisenhower's concern about the military-industrial complex, his words have unfortunately come true. He was worried that priorities are set by what benefits corporations as opposed to what benefits the country.
Name any playing card that would come into your mind. 1, 2, 3, name a card. Perfect. Now, we've never met before. No collusion.
Which is really odd because collusion is our business. Yes, collusion with the military.
You know, people sometimes think of the defense budget as you got to arm the troops, defend the nation. But for most people that are involved in it, you realize this is business. Competition for contracts between very large corporations.
Industry has to have a bottom line that's black, otherwise their shareholders don't like that. So they have to find ways to interest the government in continuing to buy the product.
Lockheed Martin and McDonnell Douglas and Boeing. Throughout America, there are factories, there are corporations that are involved on a daily basis to produce the weaponry, the ammunition, to carry out the American way of war.